Radical Islam, the contribution of Western intelligence. Welcome to you. I guess you're probably intrigued by the title, but it is what it says. It's about radical Islam and how Western intelligence contributed towards it. Since first vlogging on Shams al-Ma'arif, I've become increasingly concerned that the critique of Shams al-Ma'arif is politically motivated. It appears to be an attempt to demonise wide sections of the Muslim ulama. But why? And in whose interest is this? Furthermore, I appear to have uncovered that some young Muslims of the diaspora, particularly in the United States, are being radicalised by social media. There appears to be links to rap music and video games, but I'm far too old to fully comprehend or even explore these. But these are the very young people who are active in accusing me of shirk, even of being a Satanist. I've always been aware of the relationship between Western intelligence and radical movements, and suspected that Western intelligence is behind some of the new developments on social media. But I have to say that in researching this vlog, I am completely shocked. I really am. British intelligence and Wahhabi. Wahhabism is a Sunni Islamic. I did write revivalist, and I'm scrap that. I'm not going to say revivalist. Fundamentalist movement associated with reformist doctrines of the 18th century Arabian Islamic scholar, theologian, preacher and activist Muhammad ibn Al-Wahhab, who lived from around 1703 to 1792. He established the Muwahhidun movement, which they insist on being called. They don't like being called Wahhabis at all, even though I do it. In the region of Najd in central Arabia, a reformist movement that emphasises the purging of traditional practices. Ibn Abd al-Wahhab and his followers were highly inspired by the influential 13th century Habali scholar Ibn Taymiyyah, who was around from I guess about 1263 to 1328. In fact, no, I think those were his actual dates. And he called for a return to the purity of the first three generations, or Salaf as they called, of Muslims, to rid Muslims of the inauthentic outgrowths, bid'ah, and regarded his work as cause scholarly reference in theology. Muhammad ibn Abd al-Wahhab was born around 1702 in the small oasis town of Uyaya in the Najd region in what's now central Saudi Arabia. As a part of his schooling, Ibn Abd al-Wahhab travelled in his youth to various Islamic centres in Arabia and Iraq. Seeking knowledge, he travelled to Mecca and Medina to perform Hajj and studied under noble Hadith scholars. After completing his studies, he travelled to Iraq and then returned to his hometown in 1740. During these travels, Ibn Abd al-Wahhab had studied various religious disciplines such as fiqh, theology, philosophy and Sufism, and following his death of his father, Ibn Abd al-Wahhab publicly began his religious preaching. Wahhabism is highly self-centred and extremely intolerant of progressive ideologies of other religions, and indeed other parts of... I wrote Islamic sects, and I'm not going to say that. Other parts of Islam, in particular Shiism and Sufism. It despises Arab nationalism with a great deal of passion, and yet it promotes Saudi nationalism, despite the fact that any nationalism is considered a violation of Islamic theology due to the concept of Islamic Ummah, the nation. Wahhabism considers itself to be the only correct way of all Islam, and any Muslim who opposes it is a heretic or a non-believer. The Saudi Wahhabis shocked the entire Muslim world in 1812 by brutally destroying and defacing the sacred tomb of the martyr Hussein bin Ali, Prophet Muhammad's grandson, in Karbala in Iraq, a particularly holy shrine to Shiite Muslims. They also mercilessly slaughtered, the estimates certainly more than 2,000 and could be over 4,000 people in Karbala. And they stole anything that wasn't nailed down. In fact, it took over 4,000 camels to carry their huge loot. They raided and pillaged many pilgrim caravans and several major cities in Hejaz, including the two holiest cities, Mecca and Medina. This included banishing the descendants, the Sharif of Muhammad, from Hejaz. In Mecca they turned away pilgrims, and in Medina they attacked and desecrated Prophet Muhammad's mosque, opening his grave, and sold and distributed its value relics and expensive jewels. In August 1924 they broke into people's homes in the Hejaz city of Taif, threatened them and stole their money at gunpoint. Then they decapitated boys and old men, and were amused by the horrified women who were screaming and weeping. Indeed, many of the women hid in water wells to escape the ongoing rape and murder committed by the Wahhabis. They also murdered many Imams while they prayed in their mosques. Memoirs of Mr. Hemfer, the British spy to the Middle East, or Confessions of a British Spy, is a document purporting to be an account by an 18th century British agent Hemper of his major role in founding Wahhabism as a part of a conspiracy to corrupt Islam. Hemper claims to have flattered Wahhab until the man was willing to found his own sect. Indeed, according to Hemper, he was only one of 5,000 British agents with the assignment of weakening Islam, which the British government had planned to increase to 100,000 by the end of the 18th century. Hemfer writes, "When we reach this number, we shall have brought all Muslims under our sway, and Islam will be rendered into a miserable state from which it will never recover again." Now, it first appeared in 1888 in Turkish, in the 5-volume Mirat al-Haramian of Ayub Sabri Pasha. Indeed, Pasha could actually be the author, which suggests that it could be a work of Turkish intelligence to weaken the anti-Ottoman sentiment that was occurring in the Arab world. Now, whilst it may be an Ottoman fabrication, I do believe that it seems to expose British intelligence strategy to divide Islam, thereby undermining the Ottoman Empire. The House of Saud. Wahhabism and Saudi Arabia's ruling House of Saud have been intimately and permanently intertwined since their births. Wahhabism created the Saudi monarchy, and the House of Saud spread Wahhabism. One could not have existed without the other. Wahhabism gives the House of Saud legitimacy, and the House of Saud protects and promotes Wahhabism. The two are inseparable because each supports the other and depends on it for survival. In 1744, Ibn Abd al-Wahhab formed a pact with the local leader Muhammad bin Saud, a political religious alliance that continued for the next 150 years, accumulating politically with a proclamation of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in 1932. For more than 2 centuries, though, through to the present, Ibn al-Wahhab's teachings were championed as the official form of Islam and the dominant creed in the 3 Saudi states. In 1866, the Wahhabi House of Saud signed a friendship treaty with Britain. The treaty was similar to many infamous unequal treaties imposed by the British on other Arab puppets on the Gulf state, then known as the Persian Gulf. In exchange for British help, money and weapons, the Wahhabi House of Saud agreed to collaborate with British colonial authorities in the area. Harry St. John Brigadier Philby, CIA commander of the Indian, don't know, something commander of empire, but yeah, not sure. Anyway, and he was born on the 3rd of April 1885 and died 30th of September 1960, also known as Jack Philby or Sheikh Abdullah. He was a British Arabist, advisor, explorer, writer and colonial office intelligence officer. His only son by his first wife, Dora Johnson, was Kim Philby, who you probably know of because he became known worldwide as the double agent for the Soviet Union, who defected in 1963. Philby's view was that the interests of both British and the Saud family would be best served by uniting the Arabian Peninsula under a single government stretching from the Red Sea to the Persian Gulf, with the Saudis supplanting the Hashemites as the Islamic keepers of the holy places and protecting shipping lanes along the Suez Canal, Aden, Mumbai, then Bombay route. He claimed to be on a special mission to Central Arabia during 1917 to 1918, and it was then that he colluded with the Wahhabi movement under Ibn Saud would, with British political and military support, effectively serve British military and political objectives in the Arabian Peninsula, and indeed beyond, during the ongoing war and its aftermath. The creation of Saudi Arabia between 1902 and 1932, and with British encouragement, the Wahhabis brutally killed and wounded over 400,000 Arabs throughout the Arabian Peninsula and carried out over 40,000 public executions and 350,000 public amputations, respectively, 1% and 7% of the estimated population of 4 million. Due to its anti-atheistic and pro-capitalist tenets, Wahhabism became an effective tool in US foreign policy in combating pro-Soviet and anti-Western secular and nationalistic ideologies in the Middle East, but the Muslim world at large. In pursuing its Cold War agenda in the Middle East, the United States supported the creation of ideologically motivated regional groups such as the Muslim World League in 1962 to replace the ill-fated Baghdad Pact, the Organisation of Islamic Countries, OIC, in 1969, and the Islamic Development Bank in 1976, all headquartered in the Saudi province of Hejaz, the home of Islam's holiest sites. The United States also supported the importation en masse into Saudi Arabia of large numbers of Islamic political activists, including members of the Muslim Brotherhood and its offshoot, Hizb al-Tahrir, the Party of Liberation, who'd fled the secular pro-Soviet regimes in Egypt, Syria, Iraq and Algeria. The late Saudi King Faisal, the main architect of the pro-Western Islam-inspired policy in the Middle East, put these Muslim emigres into some and assisted by some influential scholars from Pakistan, in charge of all levels of the Saudi education system. Now, you may know that I used to live in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, and one of the people I worked with, Og, was from Pakistan, and I had the great pleasure of meeting his father, who was a real character. He'd been educated at Oxford, and he used to wear traditional Pakistani shalwar kameez But in his pocket he always carried some cutlery because of, he said if he was invited to dinner he'd always go, but he couldn't bear to eat with his hands as the Saudi did. Well, he was there, he was one of those Pakistani educational advisors, I believe, advising on road safety, and I have some tales about that, believe me. And it's they who, while paying lip service to Wahhabi rituals, penned a manifesto declaring the ultimate target of Islamization to be all facets of knowledge and professional activity. Officially renamed the educational policy of Saudi Arabia, the manifesto was adopted by the Saudi government in 1971 and implemented immediately. A policy which remains in force has not just shaped the education of Saudi students, but also millions of non-Saudi children and youths who began to flock to the country beginning in the mid-1970s. As a result, Wahhabism itself has been gradually transformed, subject to the influence of aggressive and intensely politically religious ideologies from Egypt and Pakistan that had their origins in Salafism. So the internationalization of Wahhabism obliterated the notion of absolute obedience to the ruler, and more importantly expanded Wahhabism's inherently hostile attitude to non-Wahhabi Muslims to include non-Muslims and non-Muslim powers such as the Soviet Union and the West. So that by the late 1970s, the internationalization of Wahhabism had led to the emergence of a new generation of Muslims espousing a form of highly politicalized Islamic fundamentalism that might be called Wahhabi Salafi Islam. However, in 2017, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman began to distance the House of Saud from Wahhabism, and with it Saudi Arabia also. The Salafiyya movement, and I've mentioned Salafi, term derived from Salaf al-Salih, meaning pious predecessors of the first three generations of Muslims, refers to a wider range of reform movements within Sunni Islam across the world that campaigns for the return of a pure Islam, whatever that might be, revival of the prophetic Sunnah and the practices of the early generations of Islamic scholars. Militant Islam and Western intelligence. It's widely believed that the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, had ties with Osama bin Laden's Al-Qaeda and its Afghan Arab fighters when it armed the Mujahideen groups to fight with the Soviet Union during the Soviet-Afghan War. Now, when this broke out, I was actually living in Saudi Arabia. I remember it well. In fact, the company I worked for was closely associated with the Bin Laden group of companies. And indeed, I remember contributing, I think, a month's wages to the Mujahideen, which was quite normal. You know, it wasn't really a political stance by me. In fact, if anything, you know, I suppose I was something of a supporter of the Soviets, but no, the lines were clearly drawn with the Soviet-Afghan war, and I did support the Mujahideen. In particular, there was a strong relationship between the Bush family and the Bin Laden family, and it's no secret that in the aftermath of the September the 11th, the 11th of September attacks in New York, prominent members of the Bin Laden family were allowed to leave the United States. Not only that, but they were given safe passage courtesy of the US government at a time when every aircraft and over the US airspace was otherwise grounded. About the same time as the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, the United States began collaborating with Pakistan's intelligence service, the ISI, to provide several $100 million a year in aid to the Afghan Mujahideen. I shouldn't have bothered with mine, should I? It wouldn't go far. They were getting $100 million a year from the US, fighting the Afghan pro-Soviet government and the Soviet army in Operation Cyclone. Along with native Afghan Mujahideen were the Muslim volunteers from other countries, popularly known as the Afghan Arabs, which of course included Osama bin Laden. As late as 1991, Charlie Wilson persuaded the House Intelligence Committee to continue funding of the Mujahideen, providing with $200 million for fiscal year 1992. With the matching funds from Saudi Arabia, this amounted to $400 million for that year. Afghan tribes were also delivered weapons which the United States had captured from Iraq during the Gulf War. Both MI6 and the CIA appear to have had connections to the Taliban through the opium trade, and I don't mean in preventing it, I meant what I said. General Wesley K. Clark Sr. suggested that bribed allies of the United States helped to create and fund ISIS from its very inception. Neocon Senator John McCain was seen and even photographed up close with many terrorists in the Middle East, including Al-Baghdadi in June of 2012. Indeed, al-Baghdadi and ISIS were a small, insignificant group dedicated to destroying Shia Islam until the CIA began to take interest in them. Indeed, because bin Laden's mother was a Yemeni Shia, Al-Qaeda and ISIS had always been in opposition, even at loggerheads, to each other. Timber Sycamore was a classified weapons supply and training program led by the CIA. Launched in 2012 or 13, it supplied money, weaponry and training to rebel forces fighting Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in the Syrian civil war. According to US officials, the program was run by the CIA's Special Activities Division and trained thousands of rebels. In a 2017 study conducted by the Conflict Armaments Research at the bequest of the European Union, found that external support for anti-Assad Syrian rebels significantly augmented the quantity and quality of weapons available to ISIS forces, including in the most rapid case diversion. They documented anti-tank weapons purchased by the United States that ended up in possession of the Islamic State within 2 months of them leaving the factories. And currently it's believed that the CIA are facilitating the recruitment of ISIS fighters to fight Russia in the war in the Ukraine. Social media and Satanism. A great deal of what I've reported is conjecture. But the degree to which it all seems to follow a similar theme of Western interests supporting radical Islamic groups in opposition to Shias and Sufis is uncanny. Indeed, everything seems to be coalescing. Every stone I unturn seems to be leading to the same conclusions. And the motivation, I guess, appears to be divide and rule. So my comments on social media are even more speculative. But again, there seems to be these recurring themes, and many are very personal to me. They're things that I've experienced and thought, hang on, that's odd. But as I'm putting all the pieces of the jigsaw together, I'm saying, what's happening? Now let me say, this is conjecture. It is conjecture. Now, in Young Muslim Rebels, and indeed in many vlogs, I suggest that social media appears to be being manipulated by dark forces, often political dark forces, to create division and disunity. that some of these dark forces appear to be Western intelligence services, but I'm also aware of bots created in Tel Aviv which promote the most dangerous forms of Islamic radicalism. Now, don't read too much into that. Tel Aviv is a centre for AI companies, and bots may simply be learning this rhetoric from the bulletin boards that they populate. So I'm not offering this as proof of anything, but one has to suspect, doesn't one? Where this really, I suppose that's sinister enough, but where it gets really sinister is in the condemnation of the religious practices of fellow Muslims as being satanic, vigorously promoted by social media and through an army of foot soldiers from the Muslim diaspora. Not only is Shams al-Marif singled out as promoting black magic and circuitously therefore polytheism, but the logic appears to have been borrowed from H.P. Lovecraft's Necronomicon. Well, this vlog is long enough, so maybe I should end with a well-known hadith. There in the Najd is the place of earthquakes and afflictions, and from there comes out of the side of the head of Satan. Well, I hope you've got something from this. I dare say it's challenged many of you, but I hope you understand I've tried to be firm. Yes, some is conjecture, but I have tried to base this on what I can glean as being facts, and I've tried to be fair in presenting them. It's a part of the real magic of Java, which originally I thought would show rituals in Java and would only be cut every 2 or 3 months. But what I decided to do was expand the concept to talk about things of interest. So now it's happening every 2 or 3 days. So if you have enjoyed this, or at least got something from it, if you can pass a comment and hit the like button, and if you've really enjoyed it, if you could subscribe to my channel, hit the bell and you'll get future notifications. And what I want to do is thank you so much in anticipation for that.